Hello, good evening. My name is Yuan Chao. I'm the president of Markham Unionville Provincial Liberal Association. And today, first of all, I would like to introduce our special guest, the MP candidate for Markham Unionville, Paul Chan. Paul Chan has a strong passion for public service, dedicating almost 30 years as an officer with the York Region Police. Most recently, he served as a sergeant with the Diversity and Cultural Resource Unit. During his outstanding career, Paul engaged and connected to the community at large every day and devoted himself to strengthening the inclusive community spirit that makes the York region and Markham Unionville special. And right now, I would like to ask Paul Chan to speak for a few words.
Thank you, Yan. Thank you, everybody. It's good to see some people that I know, familiar faces in tonight, and I'm glad that I'm given this opportunity to speak. As a York Regional Officer, I had a good opportunity to meet a lot of people across the region, and hopefully for me to be in politics and for me to be able to have this opportunity to go up to Ottawa, I would need your support, and I know for a fact that we can win this race and we can turn this riding back to red. So if anyone here would like to be part of my campaign team, Benny is already in my campaign. Benny has been helping me door knocking, and Benny is a fast guy. He loves to run when he be out there. So if anybody else would like to come out and support me and be on my team, I would appreciate that help. And I'm so appreciative of MP Han Dong. He's been supporting me through this. He's been giving me tips and helping me understand the process of getting into politics. So I'm very, very happy that I have this opportunity and to serve the city and the citizens of Markham. Just some of you may not know, the city of Markham is considered to be the most diverse city in all of Canada. So we have people literally from across the globe that live here in Markham, and I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so happy to be able to become an MP for you and to go up to Ottawa and serve everybody that lives in Markham. Thank you for inviting me, Yan.
Thank you, Paul. Good luck to your campaign. Okay, next, I'm going to introduce Han Dong. Han Dong was the first elected as Don Valley North Liberal Member of Parliament in 2019. As an MP, Han has consistently held service, communication, community, and celebration as the basis to his work. As a passionate advocate for Don Valley North, he has worked hard for safer community, easing traffic congestion, action to combat climate changes, and housing affordability. Han has brought community voices together to speak out on racial discrimination and promote healthy dialogue and interaction. Han has proven that he will never stop working hard to support the residents of our diverse, dynamic, forward-looking community. And right now, I would like to ask Han Dong to speak for a few words.
Thank you very much, Yan. It's so good to see everybody. Good evening. I see a lot of familiar faces, of course. Alex is here, and who is a veteran in media, and which will be very busy for the next little while. Edward's here as well. Good to see everybody. Paul, as you know, has been a longtime dedicated servant of our community. You know, some consider him as a community leader. I'm so excited that we'll be able to put his name to every door and take on the current Conservative member who we know has not been performing or act on behalf of the great riding of Markham Unionville. So I'm equally excited, as Paul said, that we heard the news that the election may be called very soon. As you know, that I was a provincial member in Ontario. So I really value the contribution of PLAs, as now with federally we call EDAs, because your dedication and your volunteerism is the bedrock of our party. Doesn't matter federal or provincial. So I am so happy to see a very engaged and lively PLA taking place in Markham Unionville, representing the progressives in Unionville, because that's what we need. Coming from my MPP background, liberals being government for 13 years, we have delivered so much. Thinking back, the first 4 years after 2003, there was the green bell, and there was a total revamp of our healthcare system. There was the new support for education system. I remember the time that I was going through high school, days where we were told, the teachers are on strike, and the student got to stay home, and see a whole bunch of people on the street and young kids. And those days are long gone. Like, there were millions of days, I think the tens of millions of days lost by Ontario students because of the poor management of the previous Conservative government. So in 2003, when the Liberals took government in Ontario, we saw the dramatic change in Ontario. We were productive, we were practical, and we were building Ontario. And it doesn't matter if it's the UP Express or Eglinton Crosstown or any of these ongoing infrastructure projects. Many of those were designed and pushed and advocated by the Liberal government, and we put through those projects. It's funny, sometimes I go to announcements, for example, for not-for-profit senior homes, and the current provincial government comes out and say, we're so happy to support Yihang or Mongshan, or the well-known names in the Chinese community, by giving all these extra beds. And I was laughing because they were the ones in the legislature voted against all these investments. If there's any credit, is that they have not cut those that they think is politically important. So if you look at the full picture and compare the 40-year mandate under Ford and 4-year mandate under Premier McGuinty, you can see the clear difference between a progressive government who is about finding solutions and build and not just the infrastructure, but build of our people, our skilled labor, and a government that decides not to do anything. All they care about is books. We saw the reaction between the federal Liberal government and the provincial Conservative government in the pandemic. Whereas across the country, or especially in Ontario, over almost 90% of government support came directly from the federal government. I remember this conversation last September, when in the caucus we talk about, there's a lot of anxiety from the parents about going back to school. Are we ready? And then we hear the school board saying that the province is not giving them any money to upgrade their infrastructure, and they weren't. They decided not to do that. So the federal government, the prime minister, made a very swift decision in a matter of days, and we just squeeze and pull from our previous current budget the $2 billion to support school boards across country to make sure they have the ventilation system. And we did it in a very prudent way. So we give half first, and they have to show their expenditure at the end of last year to be awarded for the second part. So there's close leash attached to it. What I am disappointed with as a parent is that they've wasted all this time between January till now, and now they're making an announcement on making $24 million to upgrade the school system. What were they doing in the last 6 months? And we see this increased pattern of deciding not to do anything because the federal government's going to come in and fix it. We can't have this kind of lay back or government that's focusing 90% of their energy in communications, but not only on policies. Ontarians are suffering, and I'm so happy. I can go on and venting. You can see how passionate I am with these issues. When I see long-term care homes after the second wave, see this dramatic number of deaths increasing, knowing that the government knew the situation, had the same minister, so there's no excuse that there's a new minister transition, whatnot, and they decide not to do anything. 6 months, last summer, they did nothing. And then we saw the death toll on the long-term cares in the second wave. Same pattern again with our school system this time. So sometimes I say to myself, as one of the 338 member, what is my responsibility? I've devoted much of my career in the politics, and I always ask myself repeatedly, why am I in this business? And I think, especially coming from a ethnic background, we have to speak up. We have to kind of represent the ethnic community, whichever community that you come from, and hold those, whether it's multiculturalism, whether it's our own culture, hold the good principles into heart and execute, and behave based on these great principles in our legislature, in our parliament, and speak up. So I'm so excited to see the level of diversity of the PLA here. And I know Paul's going to get a lot of support from the PLA, from the EDA. I counted it there about 10 liberal members at the federal level has Ontario legislature or Queen's Park experience, whether they were MPP or staff to minister. And so we have a lot in common. And I am a believer that when PLA and EDAs work together, we can win these ridings. We should be able to win the Greater Toronto, all Greater Toronto ridings, because that's where immigrants, there's where progressive thinkers and solution seekers are concentrating. And they're the engine of the progressive policies of the country. And we're the one that has that responsibility on our shoulder to move Canada forward, to shape Canada the way that we believe they should be. So we're gonna hear a lot of tough questions about Indigenous community, about economic recovery, about debt and deficit. But I have to tell you, my last 16 months at the federal government, I've seen a government that is hardworking and try to cover all bases and move the whole country into a progressive position. So, I can give you all the details about examples like Indigenous community, whether it's a water advisory or affordable housing or infrastructure, research and technology, investment in our pharmaceutical manufacturing sectors, and all of that is to build Canada up. And today, I believe that we have a topic that could be controversial, especially in the immigrant community. But that's why it's invaluable for us to talk about it and find the right balance for the federal government to take into account when we actually design and shape the policy and regulation. So we will make sure that the purpose is served without any unintended consequences. And I believe there are experts joining us today, and I look forward to today's conversation, and hopefully I can take something back to my caucus and share with the minister and prime minister. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Yan.
Thank you, Han. Okay, next, join us, we have Lisa Patel. Lisa Patel is the immediate past president of Toronto Regional Real Estate Board, and now she serves as a director of the TREB for many years. Lisa has also worked with several groups, including the Canadian Youth Business Foundation, now as known as Futurepreneur Canada, for close to 15 years as a mentor and coach to assist young entrepreneurs meet their business goals. Lisa is also a mentor for University of Information and Technology, assisting young leaders in their career endeavors, and the past director of Board of Trade. Over the past 15 years, Lisa volunteered with a numerous amount of community organizations. And right now, I would like to invite Lisa Patel to speak for a few words.
Thank you very much, Yan. And it's a pleasure to join all of you this evening. And I'm very honored to join you, and I look forward to our discussion. And I can't say anything better because Han has pretty much said the words that I promote as well, which is we need to promote more love of humanity and community. And that is what is always going to take our world to that next level of inclusivity where we want to go. But I look forward to the discussions, and I look forward to one day seeing Yan take even more leadership, not only in the real estate world, but in the political world. And Paul, I'm gonna hire you to learn some languages.
Thank you. And right now, I would like to introduce our moderator today, which is John Pownell. John Pownell was a teacher and also author of the textbook. And he's also serving as the writing president during Michael Chan's period. And right now, I'd like to ask John, to take the mic.
Well, thank you very much, John. This evening, we're going to be taking a look at the empty house tax. And it's a subject that I've been spending the last few days boning up on so that we can talk about this issue. It's an interesting situation because it's one of these things where it's got broad support across a lot of levels, but there's no consistent agreement on exactly what is involved. I just want to give an example of that. I took this from the federal government's website, and this is about their tax on unproductive use of Canadian housing by foreign non-resident owners. So there's no ambiguity in terms of how our government is viewing this. In fact, they write, across the country, young Canadians who are starting to build their future are running up against sky-high housing prices. In the 2020 fall economic statement, the government announced it would take steps over the coming year to implement a national tax-based measure targeting the unproductive use of domestic housing that is owned by non-resident, non-Canadians. This will help to ensure that foreign non-resident owners who simply use Canada as a place to passively store their wealth and housing pay their fair share. And in Budget 2021, the government announced its intention to implement a national annual 1% tax on the value of non-resident, non-Canadian owned residential real estate that's considered to be vacant or underused, effective January the 1st, 2022. The tax will require all owners, other than Canadian citizens or permanent residents of Canada, to file a declaration as to the current use of the property, with significant penalties for failure to file. They go on to say homes are to live in. This measure is one tool among several to ensure that Canada's housing market is a place to grow for Canadians starting their families and building their future. And in the coming months, the government has indicated it will release a consultation report to provide stakeholders with an opportunity to comment on the parameters of the proposed tax, including whether special rules should be applied to small tourism resort communities. Moving forward, the government intends to work closely with the provinces, territories, and municipalities. And it's estimated that this measure will increase federal revenues by $700 million over 4 years, starting in 2022-23. These revenues will help to support the government's investments in making housing more affordable. Just less than a week ago, last Friday, the Department of Finance made this press release. The federal government is committed to ensuring all Canadians have a safe and affordable place to call home. In communities across the country, the recent and rapid rise in housing prices has made finding an affordable place to call home increasingly difficult. For many Canadians, the most important investment they will ever make is the purchase of a home. And increasingly, that dream is becoming unaffordable. And continues, homes should not be passive investments. This is why in the recent federal budget, the government announced its intention to implement Canada's first ever national tax on non-resident, non-Canadian owned residential real estate that's considered to be vacant or underused. They are launching their consultation. They launched them last Friday, and people are welcome to participate. So let's take a look at this tax specifically. The purpose of the tax is to return empty or underutilized properties. I know what empty means. I don't know what underutilized means. To use for long-term rental. This is to relieve pressure on the rental housing market and to motivate landlords to reach out and rent their empty or underused homes to increase the rental supply. This is not the first time this has been done. Vancouver has gotten the jump on this. In Vancouver, they have a 3% tax. Well, it will be 3% in 2022. So it's coming. It applies to single family and multifamily condos, applies to seasonal homes, manufactured homes, which I think is what we call trailers nowadays. Toronto is going to start with a 1% tax. So these are municipal taxes, I presume, on top of federal taxes. There is demand for this around the world. So Canada is not in isolation. Melbourne has a 1% tax. New York City is implementing a tax on properties that are second use properties that have a value of more than $5 million US. I don't know what $5 million US buys you in New York. I have concerns that it's probably not very much. But these are large numbers, 3%. If you took a home that's worth $1 million in Vancouver, and that's probably just a hovel or a shed, given what real estate prices are out there, you're talking about $30,000 a year going to the municipal government, plus another $10,000 for the federal government if you don't rent out your property. I don't know what renting out really means. I have to tell you, to be fair, I am a landlord. In addition to having a home in Markham, I also own a condo townhouse. It is rented, but again, for people who are renting out properties, this is another challenge for them. So what I'm looking for this evening is to get some feedback, both from Han and from Lisa, in terms of what does this tax really mean? Does it mean anything to me, or is this strictly a tax grab on non-Canadian, non-resident, effectively just foreigners? And what strategies might you recommend to people you know who are foreigners and are in this situation to deal with what to me seem to be very large amounts of tax? There is a house just behind me that has, I think, been listed several times for a little over $4 million. Even if it's just 1% tax, it's still $40,000. This place only pays about $14,000 in property taxes. So that's a big increase in expense. And I don't know how foreign landlords would react to it, whether that means they'll start dumping these properties or whether they'll find some other workaround. That's my introduction. I'm going to start with Lisa. I'd like to hear from her perspective on what does this really mean? Should we be concerned at all? And is there some fairness in this? We have a housing problem. We've discussed this before as a group. In some ways, this impresses me as how Donald Trump dealt with the wall. He would make Mexico pay for it. Are we looking at our deficits and trying to figure out which foreigners are we going to hit up for this money? So Lisa, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you for that detailed background. And of course, in my year of presidency, which just ended in June, as of June 30th, this was one of the topics that fell in my year because this was brought up in 2020 and TREB was heavily involved in consultation with it. But I just want to back up a little bit. And I know you mentioned, John, that you already had discussions about, the housing crisis. Well, we have to look at a little bit of a background too. If we look even in the last year, there's always something coming up. We fought against the taxation on $2 million homes. That was coming up. So it seems like there's always an incentive to creating some sort of taxation. We understand that revenue is needed for cities, and especially during the pandemic, that need has been heightened. And where those funds are going to come from are going to be up to cities across the GTA. But ultimately, if we look at the housing sector overall, we go back even a couple of years ago, and like I've been in the real estate space. Just to give everyone a background, I've been in this industry for over 12 years. And prior to the real estate industry, I was in the mortgage industry. And prior to that, I should just let everybody know that I grew up with entrepreneurs that owned and operated 18 different businesses across Ontario. So I grew up in the real estate space in many ways, just indirectly in some spaces. But I can just say that if we back up and look at the last 10 years of the housing market, and even look at like the municipal taxes that have been added over the course of years, and now other cities saying, oh, wait a minute, is that another source of revenue for us? And I think that the problem is that we keep looking at the same bubble in many ways. Even the foreign tax was brought up a couple of years back. I remember this when TREB was lobbying against this before. The speculation of who was buying housing in Canada, was it, and especially in Ontario, was it foreign buying? And of course, we did some studies back then and determined that it wasn't foreign ownership. And so here we are now coming back to this situation. And I will say that TREB's been heavily involved in consultations on this particular aspect, and making sure that it was noted, what is considered vacant, because even our members had that same question of, wait a minute, they're going to impose a tax, and what is considered vacant? How does this impact communities across Ontario, and even across the GTA? And so I will just say, it's still too early to determine if this is going to provide more opportunity for housing or create more opportunity for home ownership at this stage of the game. I think that ultimately, until they actually test the waters, we will know. And the other aspect, the other aspect to this is the speculation, right? Like, we don't know how many homes out there are really considered vacant, that are not being occupied for the last 6 months, or that are deemed vacant. So I think that, ultimately there's got to be much more study, because we believe heavily in evidence-based decisions. And I think that would be helpful in this process of determining, is this the right way to go? In terms of the actual taxation, I think once they have a better idea of how many homes are out there, then they can determine, or even understand why these homes are sitting vacant. I can also share with everybody, in my year of presidency for TREB, in speaking, we became global partners to all of South America, to France, and we're still working on, we have had consultations with presidents from all over Europe. We're partners to Florida, as well as to Miami Association. And I will tell you, the demand for housing is not just a Ontario or Canadian aspect. The demand for housing has been evident all over the world. And one thing I can tell you is that when borders do open up, that we will see a lot of foreign interest in our marketplace. So that also comes to mind too, when I think about your questions, John, because I sit here saying, okay, well, if we know that there's people we already know that we've witnessed a demand of home ownership take place. We also know that there's people globally all over the world that are interested in investing money right here. So what does that mean, and what does that look like in the course of in the next few months, in the next year, in the next 10 years? And ultimately, so I don't really say that this tax is good or bad, or in this case, should we be concerned? I think it's still early in the game to really determine where this will go, how it benefits community. The bottom line is, we can say we do have a housing shortage. We do know that. And I will also mention that TREB did put out early in the year, they also shared their own examples of what we could do, which would have created 300,000 to 400,000 homes in the coming year, in the years to come, if they were allowed. And that was another report that we had handed into the city as well. So there is different avenues to creating housing, but we also have to keep in mind that immigration is our number one source. And so what does this country look like? I think that there's just a lot of aspects that aren't being looked at when we consider these taxations. And so I'm glad that the city is going through the consultation process and trying to determine what is, and looking at all aspects. I'm just hoping that people raise these issues, because we need to, the biggest challenge is every time we see policy take place is there's not enough points to put in of not just now, what does this look like in the next 10 years? And to your point, you brought up Vancouver, right? And just because something works in Vancouver, it doesn't mean that it works across all provinces. And that's the other aspect. There's also, we have to look at, well, how much of Vancouver has vacant homes that they've, that it's sitting at 3%. And that I can't remember the exact number of revenue that it creates, but I know I have it. And one thing I will say that is, at least we can say that the city's making sure that it's stated that it's not going to be another revenue source like LTT. So, but there's still a lot of other items that I think that really needs to be addressed. And I'm just hoping in this consultation process that they're asking the right people and getting all the information.
Thank you very much, Lisa. By the way, the numbers for Vancouver, $88 million. They are proud to advertise that. And they also are proud to say that 92% of the revenue comes from foreign owners and satellite families. I do not really know what a satellite family is, but also Canadians who live outside British Columbia. I have relatives who live in BC, as I'm sure many others on this call do. So yeah, I'm not really sure how all that works. I understand there are some very special things about the Lower Mainland. Basically, there's a very small amount of land that you can actually build anything on. And the US border and the mountains sort of determine where that can be. And literally their homes built right up to the US border. If you're in White Rock, BC, and you're in your backyard, you can shake hands with your US neighbor. So I'd like to give Han the opportunity now to make his case. I was reading stuff that the government has put out, and hopefully they're reelected. I presume that they have every intention of carrying this through. Han, take it away.
Thank you, John. And Lisa, I took down some mental notes and to what you were saying, and I think you were absolutely right, and especially coming from a person that's in the industry. I think what you said is very helpful. I took the time to, while listening, put the consultation, the government official consultation webpage in the chat. So I encourage everyone to take a look at it, click on it, so you have a basic understanding. What the government usually do is, when we go out to a public consultation, we will provide a discussion paper to frame the discussion, so we know, we hope, with that help, the end conversation will crystallize to a few suggestions, useful suggestions to the government to fine tune a policy. Judging from whether it's a full economic statement or again repeated in the budget, I do believe the government has the intention to move forward on this. I'll share a story with you. While I was an MPP, the first year, when we heard a lot of complaint about Toronto real estate value start rising, I think it was in 2015 or 2015. I went to Charles Sousa, the then finance minister. I said, Charles, I know Charles quite well. We used to work together. Charles, we got to do something about this. The people in my riding and even the real estate agents are saying it's scary. You got to do something about this. And then the response was that no knee-jerking movements, and we'll take a look at it. We'll observe what's going on. A year after, the government, the discussion within government started pointing to, we got to do something. And then because of that movement and the rumors that the government is thinking about doing something, the market reacted. And we saw people are complaining that, there's some made up date that the government's going to come out with something, and we saw a small dip in the price. And then I heard a complete different opposite voice is that, oh, no, government don't do anything. So again, as a good MPP, to reflect his opinion, I went to Charles Souza. I said, Charles, now the advice is not to do something. But then again, of course, we remember the 16 regulatory changes that came out of provincial government. And then ultimately, I think politically, we suffer a loss at the end. So the lesson I learned there is that it's never a good time for the government, for whatever reason, to use its policy tool to manipulate the market, unless that there is some there are times that the government has to step in to restore fairness, and also to provide political leadership for a market or consumer behavior to move towards some direction. For example, the New Energy Act was the incentive, and then we're moving to a more efficient use of our energy. On this, and I looked at the discussion paper, and I reviewed the whatever information is available at this point. Everything is up in the air, going through the consultation. I don't think this is a revenue tool for the government. The reason why I say this is that despite the success of Vancouver, in revenue collected from this, I think the reason for it is because their real estate price held. It did not go down. So for foreign investors, for foreign owners, they can afford to pay that 3% or 1% annually, as long as they know that the value of their real estate increases exceeding that point. So for them, they're actually just making less profit, but they're still making a profit. So that number will keep going up until, if there is a crash in the market, not crash, but if there's a slight correction in the market, and the increase of profit or increase of value start slowing down and ultimately below the tax rate, and then the foreigner will think about, oh, maybe I should sell it or do something with it. So that to count it as a revenue tool, it's not sustainable for any level of government. So I honestly believe it's not a revenue tool, or consider a major revenue tool, by the federal government. We are entering an era that, for the next few years, we'll see annual deficit in tens of billions of dollars. So whether it's $700 million or even $1 billion, it's a lot of money, but it's not going to change the debt and deficit outlook for the government. That's another reason I don't see it as a revenue source. I also don't see it as a policy that will all of a sudden restore the true value or correct the market to that extent, because when you talk to people from the industry, they'll say the foreign ownership, or especially in this very refined definition, that those are underused, represents a very small percentage of our domestic ownership. So I don't have the exact figure, but I think it's probably in the 3 to 5% max. So it doesn't matter, they're going to hold it or they're going to sell it, it's going to impact, I think it will have very little impact on market price in Canada. So I don't see it as a policy tool to influence the market price in any way. So what is it? I say that it's probably coming out of the intent that we need to create a fairness in the market. Because real estate is it's a very controversial topic, because on one hand, you have new immigrants, you have young graduates, and young professionals looking for a property to build a home. On the other hand, so they're looking for affordable housing prices. On the other hand, you have people works in their entire life to accumulate this biggest investment, and looking at the value of it, and to see their future to make their future retirement plan. So if the government getting to it, and we all, political people here, we are putting us in a very tough position. You cannot police. Either way, you're gonna get criticized by. So I don't think it's a political advantage for us to really start this conversation at the federal government. So it's not a political decision. That's what I'm trying to say. So what is it? I see this as out of fairness because you have homes that's not often visited, being vacant, and you have foreign investors do not live in Canada, do not contribute to our society, and they are making a killing. They may or may not be filing their personal income tax in Canada. So there is no way for our society to get a share of their benefit. And that to the working class, to anybody, that I don't think it's fair. So another part of it's unfair when you have hundreds of, maybe in the thousands of, I don't know the exact figure, of these properties sitting empty, knowing major urban centers like Toronto has housing or rental supply less than 1%. And all experts says that's a very dangerous area to be in. It's going to seriously affect our future, our growth. Because when people think about, ask how much it is to rent a place in downtown Toronto versus how much they can make, they'll probably make make some other career choices, and we have to correct this because that's going to affect direct foreign investment as well into Toronto or the GTA area or in Vancouver in this case. So I think it's out of fairness and it's out of the intention or the plan for sustainable growth, economic growth. And that's the true intention of this legislation proposal. So it's good time to talk about it now because we know the consultation will end September 17th. If election gets called like this Sunday, it's actually in the writ. So I'm sure this will come up at the door when I knock on doors. People will see this on, my suggestion or my response will be that it's in consultation. I'll share share the link with them and make sure they're in this conversation and say their piece. I always I'm a backbencher. I say what's on my mind in the caucus, and Paul would know that, very soon. I always look at the detail of legislations we propose. In this case, and I read the whole thing, and there's a whole bunch of exemption clause. I think there's a very important group that's missing here is actually international students. International students and foreign professionals who are currently on work permit but has the intention to immigrate to Canada. At the province, I suggest Charles Sousa to look at international students as a possible exemption. And at the end, the way they design it is that if you study or work in Canada exceeding 2 years and receive your PR, you can ask for a rebate. I think that's a very reasonable policy because you do want to encourage, and we see a lot of immigrants coming here and even more international students coming here contributing to our communities. And we want to make sure the incentive is there for them to stay and keep contributing. And I don't have to tell you the case. I think Michael Chan said it many, many times in the past. What a valuable proposition for us to keep getting those international students. We don't pay for their primary or secondary education. They pay on their own, and they pay their way through university and colleges and find a job and instantly become taxpayers. It's a good deal for Canada. So we want to make sure the incentive is there for them to stay. And a lot of them do benefit from the housing boom, and they'll buy a place and that subsidized with their tuition. That's the reason why the colleges and university can charge 3-4 times tuition compared to domestic students. And it's all in that same equation. If you change something and they are not exempted, and maybe they'll recalculate. Maybe Canada will not be able to attract this many international students if tuition is becoming a true burden, as well as the taxes and rent and whatnot. So I always look at these details, and when you consider the numbers, someone just put it on there that we have a half a million new immigrants coming in Canada, and I can tell you at any time Canada has anywhere between 200 to 230,000 international students in Canada, and they contribute more than $20 billion a year in our system. So having said that, I'm all ear here. I just want to put that into perspective. If that's the intention, is create fairness in the market. is to encourage efficient use of our vacant properties. Is this going to be enough for foreign owners to open up their home to put on the market for tenants, for renters? Or if this is the right tool to use, at all, to encourage them to provide that supply to the market, because I think it's, I think for my kids, it's going to be a reality that Canadians, as part of their Canadian dream, will have to see that maybe not owning a house in their life, maybe they'll rent a house in the first half of their life. That might very well be the reality going forward. And as a government, we have to decide. We have to decide what kind of policy we're going to come out to reflect that reality. We have the rapid housing initiatives, the building thousands of affordable rental units across the country, right? And that is catered to those, especially young professionals who's starting up, to have a place that they only pay 30% of their income into. At the provincial level, think about the PLA platform. When we were in government, we introduced a reform in development charges, in Section 37 charges, and we give the legislative support to the municipalities. If they require 20% of affordable housing to be included in any of the new bills, they have the tools to do that. What happened was that Ford came in, bundle everything together. Now those policies are pretty much tossed out the window. So I think that it doesn't matter federal government or provincial government, we have a responsibility to provide that direction through our policies, how we want this market to react, how we want our private sector to play a role, right? I think with the Liberal leadership, it was very clear. And I think I hope that in your engagement with your constituents going to the door, you should point these out. I talked to city councilors with regard to community benefit package, and they're saying that, we're not getting the investment from the developers, the share from the developer as we used to. I said, well, who's pocketing all this money? Is it the province? And no, it's not the province. They reformed the whole thing. The developer benefits, they pay less into our government, into our community. And to me, that is not fair. So there's a lot of sort of advocacy can come out of this, but I don't think this is designed to correct the market, nor is designed as a tax revenue tool.
Well, thank you very much, Han. I just want to point out, as you've already pointed out, here in Canada, we are absolutely addicted to international student tuitions. Our secondary and our post-secondary institutions are absolutely reliant on that money. If they don't have it, they're in trouble, big trouble.
That's right.
So it's important that we not just maintain our current level of international students, but do things to bring more in. More means more money, and really it's a tremendous source of profit in the education.
That's why I think this discussion is important, and I hope what's coming out of it, whether it's by individuals of the PLA or as a political and not-for-profit group, you should put in a submission to the ministry and help me to strengthen our argument. I have already said to Christian Freeland's office that I would like to see international students being exempted in this new clause, because that is the reality, and they will suffer because they're not Canadians, and they're here to study, and should they decide to buy a house while they're studying to save on rent, it's all reasonable. As a parent, that's a smart move I would do, and I think but many of them, I say 70% of them has the intention to stay in Canada, and we should provide that incentive for them to stay in Canada and to be exempt from this tax.
Thank you. Lisa, I had a question for you. You're in a situation where you may be making recommendations to clients in terms of how they should deal with this situation. I don't know how you determine that a property is empty. Just because there aren't newspapers on their front door, it doesn't mean that somebody doesn't live there at least at some point. And certainly I know people who have more than one home. They have cottage properties. They have properties in Florida. Yes, their properties are not used as much as they could be, but these are the lifestyle choices that these people have made. So what does empty mean?
So it's a good question, and it's something that I mean, I can tell you that TREB also brought to the table in a consultation with City Council as well. And I mean, if we look at empty or vacant and how they're defining it is in the last 6 months. So cottage property, all of those things we asked for exemptions on, or snowbirds, for example. We've all asked for all of that to be exempted from this, because the same thing that you asked was the same thing that you know, us as realtors and I can say member realtors all asked that same question. I also wanted to point out one more thing, John, in just and of course in regards to Hans' conversation, you know, we have 410,000 immigrants coming into this country, expected to come into this country, and it could be even more at this point too. And the reality is there isn't enough rental housing. So pre-pandemic, we already were experiencing a rental shortage. And in the pandemic, we witnessed people really look at lifestyle more than anything else, and really rephrase how they want to live and what is acceptable to live in, and how important the parameters of space was. And then of course now post-pandemic, here we are, and I can say that you know, in a year where we saw demand for housing so strong, we are witnessing right now a surge of the rental market come back. And so so even with this amount of immigration coming in, we don't have the supply to support it right now. And that is a challenge. And you know what, here's my bigger question to all of you to consider is, this is wonderful, you know, that this will be an opportunity to create some level of rental housing potentially, or maybe it could be home ownership opportunities in some ways, but that's not sustainable if we're talking about the next 10 years. I mean, Han, you brought up even your children and the cost of rentals in the future and now, and all of these things. We have to really look at these and examine them in a deeper level. And this is why I'm so big on, you know, what does this look like in the course of 5 years or 10 years? And I know that this is going to be a test pilot, and you and most of us on this call will know that usually when the government implements something, it doesn't go away. But I will say that, you know, what does that look like in the next 5 years when you have more immigration coming into Canada? And we're already at a housing supply shortage. And even with those plans that you mentioned, Han, it's not enough. There's so much red tape that's preventing a lot of housing from being done today. And even the builders will tell you themselves, as fast as they're building them, it's not enough. And so we really need, this is why I said the out of the box needs to start happening. We need to take our lenses wider and look at this on a whole new front, because the way that we're looking at this, we're going to keep running into the same circle over and over again. And it's just going to be like, okay, let's reinvent the wheels. We'll create another tax and maybe that will help. And it's not solving the issue to housing.
Thank you. There's a question that also came up in terms of looking at this. Once you imagine that some place is empty, how do you enforce it? There's just so much money that's involved that, I'll give you an example. The house behind me, there is a couple that live in it. I believe they're custodians. I don't believe that that's the owner. I believe that the owner is a foreign national. It's a nice house and they do a great deal of work to keep it up. They have a nice garden in the back. I see them working on the house, cleaning it. They do not appear to have other employment. I'm just wondering, is that house empty or is it not empty? And are we going to be in a situation where we are employing people to be tenants? So Han, I'll let you take that one first.
Yeah, so according to the discussion paper, I think CRA is going to be charged with that responsibility. There is expectation on the owner that they will have to voluntarily to disclose the ownership and whether or not it will fit the definition of a vacant property. Like they'll probably say that where they live and whatnot. So CRA, I mean, the detailed enforcement regulation, or you got to give them a regulation to enforce with, has not, of course, has not been announced yet. So I don't have an answer to your question, but it's a very good question. If we have foreign owner who invest in a piece of property, don't even live in Canada, how is CRA going to contact them? Are they going to are they right now currently filing taxes in Canada? And what's their relationship with CRA? And so that it's all these questions that we can ask during the regulatory development period. So just to what Lisa was saying, that we have all these immigrants coming in, at least for the next 3 years. Or if we hold a majority next 4 or 5, 6 years, I hope as long as possible. We have to look at Toronto, because I remember 30 years ago when I came to Toronto City was what 2 point something, 3 million people. I'm talking about the GTA area, and when you look at GTA right now, it doubled its number. So if Canada now has 37 million people, in 10 years, if we keep up with the immigration pace, you'll exceed 40 million people. And a lot of these newcomers will concentrate in urban centers. So we'll see a sharp increase of, a Toronto population, Vancouver population. Out of the 400,000, if I have to take a guess, I say at least 150,000 will be coming to Toronto or the GTA area, maybe close to half. So if that's the case, then us as citizens, we have to think: is that a good thing for me personally, and also is that a good thing for our community? I think it is, because with all these people coming in, they're creating opportunity, they're creating all these economic activities, they're putting Canada, you're putting Toronto on the world stage. I think it's a good thing. But
I think Hannah's frozen. He may unfreeze at some point. Hopefully.
hello, am I still frozen?
No, you're unfrozen.
Okay, great. Okay.
Yes.
So what I was saying
unfrozen
is
MP.
what I was saying, that as liberals, as progressives, we believe that immigration is the base of this country, is where we are going, is where we draw the strengths to compete internationally. And so if that's what we believe in, then we have to think about all the challenges around it. Housing is definitely one of them. So how do we solve that? We talked about the private market, but we know that developers are only building so fast because they see an opportunity to make money. That's fine. But if you'll continue, you got to have incentive for them to create the supply. But at the same time, if the profit or the price start stabilize, the profit start going down, maybe the pace won't be that fast. So would that supply meet up with the demand? Maybe not. I think the government has a very important role to play here. In the 80s, Canada used to create programs to finance not-for-profit buildings of rental units across Canada. Some of it's those co-op setups. I'm a big fan of co-ops, right? Because people, once they move in there, 30% of their income goes to pay their rent, which is a very healthy percentage, and they'll be there for life. There's the strong sense of community. People knows everybody. The crime rate, the health measures, everything is above board. So I'm a big fan of co-op. I hope, and I will advocate our government to maybe revisit some of these programs to work with Co-op Canada to maybe even revive some of the old programs where a part of your rent goes into the down payment of that property. So rent to own, like that was a very short-lived program, but it was a very welcome program. So through these programs, we intentionally creating supply or creating more sustainable supply for Canadians and also newcomers. But as government, we're at an intersection. We have to make some move. That's why I say that, with the current PC government, and I hate to bash them every corner I turn, but it is so true that they decide not to do anything, and it's not acceptable. Government right now has to act. We are at this intersection, so we need to be more progressive on these policies, because the private market is not enough to provide sustainable supply for our housing market here.
Thank you very much, Han. I just want to point out, we do have a hard stop coming up in 10 minutes. So I do have more questions. If others who are viewing this have some questions as well, could you please put them in the chat? In the meantime, I have one for Lisa. We know that Canadians own an incredible amount in value of housing stock in the United States. I have a concern with foreign countries and specifically the United States retaliate against Canadians who have empty properties in America. I imagine that Florida at this time of year must be about half empty, given the number of Canadians who spend time down there. But is this something that we should have some concern about or not?
You know what, I can honestly say this, and I have a lot of very close ties to Florida Realtors Association, and I will tell you that they truly love Canadians, and they recognize the billions that Canadians bring to the U.S. and support the economy that they have never mentioned. And I can tell you, in the last year, I've also attended some of their government initiatives, and they have never brought up any taxation towards Canadians with properties in the US. And I will also say, I can tell you that in moving forward in the next 12 months, we are going to be working heavily with Florida. And so that will be interesting to see if that does come up in discussion. But I can tell you in the last year that we've never heard any such thing come from Florida. In particularly, or Miami, and many of the Sunshine States.
Thank you. Well, what I'd like to do now is give an opportunity to.
Can I just add to what Lisa was saying? Sorry,
okay,
John.
Go ahead, Han.
I mean, I judging from my timeshare salesperson, I don't think that's it. That's the case, because every time I do own a small timeshare down there, and it was not planned. It was just because they were such great salespeople, and just judging from the annual correspondence, and they love Canadians going down there, and they won't push us away. So I concur what Lisa was saying.
Well, hopefully they continue to love us.
He's also going to let us use his timeshare, so please sign up in the chat.
Well, it's good. I'll be down shortly. I'd like to give an opportunity to Han and to Lisa to summarize what we've discussed, and then I know that Jan will want to come on and thank both of you very much for what you contributed today. It's been really valuable, and I appreciate it. Thank you. So Han, you can have the first few minutes to wrap up, and then Lisa will have the final word, except for Jan, who will have the last word. Well,
as a politician, I will, I can talk for hours. It comes with a job. I'll give Lisa to go first, because I took the first round first, and give Lisa an opportunity to say a few words first.
So that means we are going past that hard stop of 8:30. So warning to everybody.
That's fine. That's fine.
I just really want to say thank you for everybody participating or tuning in tonight. These are important discussions, and if you have an opportunity to speak on these issues or have some views, speak up, speak out. The biggest challenge to change and policies is we don't have enough people that speak up. And your views and your perspectives are important. So don't just take it from me or from Yan or from anyone else here or Han. You know what? I hope that you take something stands out from you stands out and that you take with you. And I hope that you use your voice to articulate what that really means to you and what that would look like for you. And let's ultimately, it's up to all of us to come up with ideas of how to help our communities, the housing market, the whole aspect. So those are my takeaways. I just really want to thank everybody for having me here today, and much love and kindness to all.
Okay, Hannah, it's your turn.
Well said, Lisa. And I want to convey the same message. You know, I put the link there. I strongly encourage everyone to take a look at it. I think there are a couple of keywords. First of all, is the underutilized or vacancy. You know, that's a keyword. And then there's the foreign ownership. That's another keyword. So I'm sure a lot of you will be knocking on doors, you know, when election day comes, and you'll hear these questions at the door. We rely on you to communicate properly what the government is trying to do. So I think today's forum is very helpful to for you to get a good overview of what our intention is. So next time you see somebody in a you know, sort of a undecided voter and say, oh, that's just a tax grab, and you can use the argument I made. I don't think it's a tax revenue tool for the government. It's actually focused on the fairness in tax collection. So the second thing I want to say is that we can all be a little bit selfish in this consultation period. What I mean by that is that if you have a specific concern about this, like I said, my concern was international student. My father was an international student. I truly value their contribution. So I'm going to push on that. If there's a very niche point you think they should deserve an exemption, or it should be included, and it may or may not be personal to you, talk about it, because it's good for government to hear these kind of stuff, because you're representing, you know, hundreds and thousands of Canadians that are in the same situation. So we can all be a little bit selfish when we participate in these consultation period, and let the, you know, ministers and prime ministers and all these smart people figure out what's the plan for the country. But us as Canadians, it's our responsibility to participate and say our piece that is relevant to you and your family and to your community. And that's what the government is hoping for, and that's what these consultations are all about. So with that, I just want to say, you know, it's great conversation and good to talk to Lisa again, and I really enjoy every minute of it. Thanks.
Thank you.
John, can I just say, please do not call CRA, do not tell CRA that your neighbor's house is vacant, okay?
No, I'll just move in myself. Okay, Jan, it's you've got the last word.
Okay, so first of all, we'd like to thank Han and Lisa for your valuable time, and also thank you, John, to moderate this webinar. And also would like to thank all our directors, who has AJ Perry, Abdullah Tahir, Alex Yu, Benny Zhu, Edward Chu, Hamda Abdullah to be here with us. And for all the rest of the audiences, I would like to thank you for watching. And if you would like to volunteer or help us to turn this writing red, please sign up at mupla.ca. Thank you and good night.
That's great. And John, another tip, if you really miss your neighbor,